rich would be able to work just as hard, just as fast, sweating just as much, but smarter than anything on how to do it in a way that was very efficient and would never have a spot on his clothes. That started me thinking about how do you work smart and hard at the same time.
This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. My guest today is Dirk Elpersman, the Executive Vice President and COO of Tarlton General Contractors out of St. Louis, Missouri. He is also the 2019 President of the Association of General Contractors of America. The AGC is one of the most impactful associations in the construction industry. And in our conversation, we talk about Dirk's career path and how he moved from the field as a carpenter's apprentice into the office and finally into senior leadership of the family business. And he leads the business with his sister. So we dive into a little bit of that sibling dynamic and the positives and the challenges associated with that. We talk about the importance of diversity of thought in construction and how that impacts building a project successfully. And then we talk about the lessons that he's learned from the last recession and how he's applying them during the boom times in his business to ensure the profitability of the organization. And finally, we talk about his optimism regarding the future of construction. He sees construction as an industry of opportunity that talented people are coming into and that technology is being introduced into that will enable, combined with that talent, companies to build projects more profitably, more safely, and more efficiently. So enjoy my interview with Dirk, and I really appreciate him taking the time to join me. Dirk, welcome to Construction Genius. Thank you for joining me today.
Well, thanks, Eric. It's going to be a fun day. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. I noticed in looking at your biography that you started off your construction career at about the age 5 or 6 in a dirt pile in the backyard.
Yeah, probably before that. But that was probably one of my favorite toys. Was going in the back with a shovel and my Tonka trucks and building all different kinds of things back there.
That's terrific. Why did you get into construction in the first place?
It's the kind of thing that it's family business and it's what I grew up with. It's what I always knew. But I think I was drawn to it because you get to do cool things. And at the end of the day, you see the product of your labor. But there's also a whole lot of teamwork that's involved. And I think the more I got involved in construction, the more I enjoyed the teamwork aspect.
As you got into construction, how did you start? Were you immediately in the office? Your dad just brought you into the office? Or what was your path into the industry?
Yeah, so I started as a carpenter's apprentice, which St. Louis, most of the work is done with the union workforce. And so I met with the union officials and got signed up and went through my pre-apprenticeship program and then worked summers on the job site. Often we see it one way when we're in the office, but take a day like today in St. Louis, it's about 98 degrees and we're going to have a heat index of over 105. And I work summers in St. Louis and I totally understand what that was all about. And, you have a day like today and it's so hot, you can't even pick up some tools because they've been sitting in the sun so long that you're going to burn your hands. And what does that do for morale? What does that do for productivity? And all the aspects of safety. What do we have to think about from a safety standpoint?
It's interesting. I was talking to a buddy of mine this weekend, and he's a project manager for a concrete company, but he used to run work back in the day, and he was on a job site a couple of days ago, and they were doing something wrong, so he picked up some tools, and he showed them how to do it himself, and they were all blown away by
Yeah, I'd love to be able to do that, but I'm sure that my skills are not as fresh as the guys that are out there. But yeah, that's fun stuff. Like I said, I learned a whole lot in the time that I did that.
Can you remember a person when you were a carpenter's apprentice? Can you remember one or two people who may have had an impact on your learning curve as you were getting into the business?
Oh, that's really good. As a carpenter's apprentice, you're always usually paired with a journeyman, and I got paired with one gentleman, worked hard and smart all the time, would come to work every day, and his carpenters in St. Louis wear white pants and typically a white shirt, not necessarily, but he would come to work in bright white pants and a button-down shirt, white shirt every day, and we'd be working in the same muddy, dirty conditions, and here was me in my t-shirt and white pants, and I would be covered, dirty as can be, and somehow Rich would be able to work just as hard, just as fast, sweating just as much, but smarter than anything on how to do it in a way that was very efficient and would never have a spot on his clothes. That started me thinking about, how do you work smart and hard at the same time? And then there were the guys that kind of show up maybe at work a little ragged from the weekend or a day before, and you realize that, boy, if you're really going to succeed, you got to have your head in the game all the time. And so I learned a little bit of the good things from folks, and then I learned a little bit of the things that not to do from folks all the way around. I think the folks that I learned the most from are the ones that were willing to take the time with me or with any other apprentice there. Those were some of the true leaders early on in my career that I learned from.
That's interesting. Just as you were saying that, I was thinking about the receiver from the 49ers from back in the day, Jerry Rice, and he always used to make a big deal about his personal appearance on the field, because he figured that if he came onto the field all sort of buttoned up and ready to go, it would really affect the way that he played.
Yeah, I think there's something to that.
Yeah, interesting. So from being a carpenter's apprentice, what was your next step in your construction journey?
Well, I was doing that in college, and so I didn't graduate with an engineering degree. I graduated with a business degree, but I started in engineering, and I always say I'm not an engineer, but I have engineering tendencies. I always knew I wanted to come back and work in the business. That was just my goal. I loved what we did. I loved a million things about construction, but early on, my dad and I had the conversation that said, would love to have you on the team at some time, but only after you've gone out and worked on your own. You got to go out and find your own job and do that for a little bit, and then come back when you're ready to come back, not because you feel like you have to. And so after I graduated from college, I worked in Chicago for 3 years, worked in mortgage banking. And I liked the numbers aspect of it. I liked seeing a little bit of what was important to the overall picture of getting a project done. But I didn't realize that I missed a lot of the fun things about construction. In the mortgage banking world, it's not as much of a team sport. You're working with your clients and you're working with your lenders. But I really missed the feeling at the end of the day that as a group we accomplished something, or at the end of the week, or at the end of the project, and you walk away and you say, man, we all worked on this together. And we would place a loan, but they'd never give us a suitcase full of money at the end for the job. You might see a check, or more often than not, funds were electronically transferred. And I just missed that tangible nature of construction, you walk on a job and you can feel the hum of a project that's going well. It was getting to a point where I had pretty much mastered the skills of my job and was looking for a change, and happened to have a meeting with my dad when he was up in Chicago visiting, and I said, "Hey, what do you think about me coming back?" And he said, "Well, this was in March, so probably by the end of the year, it might be a good time for you to do so." And that's at the wheels roll.
So when you got back into the business, what was your role in the organization?
Well, I started, my title was project engineer. And at the time, we had this brand new software, scheduling software called Primavera, which I kind of laugh now because for a long time it was the mainstay in scheduling software, but it was new to us at Tarlton, and we had a client that was requiring us to use it on a project. And so since I didn't have any background in anything else, I thought, it'd be a good idea to put Dirk in charge of that and of learning the software and then teaching it to others. And so that was my first job, was being a scheduler on a grains handling facility for Anheuser-Busch, and that really exposed me to the rest of what project engineering was about, and project management on our jobs.
As a family member, did you feel an extra burden to prove to the folks that you just weren't, like a daddy's kid coming in and doing stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think do it right as a family member. It means you got to work twice as hard. I was very thankful that I had the opportunity to go work someplace else before going to work at Tarlton, because it gave me a degree of self-worth that I might not have had, might have always questioned had I come straight to work at Tarlton. But I also had a lot of nice comments from the folks that I was working with. Yeah, at least you've gone out, you've seen other things, you've done other things, and then you come back, bring them back to Tarlton, and however they manifest themselves. But coming in, I felt that it wasn't something that you can sit back and say, okay, we got this thing figured out. I think my biggest mistake was coming in and thinking that I had to know everything, because I sure didn't. And I think I figured that out fairly early, that it wasn't so much as important as what I know, but am I willing to go out and learn what I don't know?
Not only are you the leader of your company, the CEO of Tarlton, but you're also the AGC of America president this year.
Right. Yep.
And your theme for the year is the University of Construction. How does your own personal experience in the industry tie into you picking that theme for your presidency this year?
Well, it really started out early in my career. Tracy Hart's my business partner, and she's also my sister. And we started in the company at about the same time. And our dad said, "Hey, you want to go to the AGC convention?" And we had gone to these as kids, sort of as maybe as a family vacation type of deal.
Sure.
But this time, now we're working in the business, and he says, you just got to go, and you go sit in on any meeting. They're all open. Just find anything that looks of interest and sit in. And we drank from the fire hose. And then, maybe a year or two later, said, "Well, if you want to go back, you got to get involved." And so Tracy and I both looked at kind of a list of committees to join and what we were interested in, and joined those committees and got involved and continued our learning curve.
You said something very powerful there. You said that your sister is your business partner.
Right. Yep.
And I know when I think about going into business with one of my sisters, I'm like, no way, there's no way I could do that. So tell me, how have you guys managed that relationship over the years?
I think it's the honest answer is very carefully. We've known each other basically our whole lives, and so the things that wouldn't bother you with a colleague because you've only known them a short period of time might bother you with somebody that you've known for, again, your whole life.
Right.
And so you got to work closely and work hard at working together. The cool thing is that our personalities are very complementary when they're at their best, and that works really, really well. When either of us are at our extremes, for example, I'll spend a little more time analyzing things before acting, making sure that hey, this is the right path to go down. And if I do that for too long, then I might drive Tracy crazy. That's something that I have to be aware of and know that can be a source of irritation and try to manage as best as I can.
That's so interesting that you have that insight that different behavioral styles can be a benefit, but at the same time they can be a challenge, and we have to be aware of those and make sure that we're adjusting accordingly. That's
just human nature 101. Our best attributes can be our biggest detriments if we take them too far. And we had some good coaching, and we continue to do a lot of executive coaching along the way, just to make sure we're on the same path and working together on things. I can't imagine not working with my family. That's just something that I've thoroughly enjoyed throughout my career.
As you came into more senior leadership roles in the organization, what was the biggest challenge that you found as you took on more responsibility?
I think you have to balance knowing a little bit about a lot of things, but recognizing that you're just not going to know everything. Maybe some of the biggest mistakes I made early were, thinking, I'm supposedly the person in charge here. I've got to know that. And moving forward, it's like, there are a lot of folks that I'm working with that are maybe closer to the action, that know exactly how this situation can be handled. Sometimes they defer to you because, you're the leader of the business or the unit or whatever, and I think it's really important that you go back to them and say, well, what do you think? How do you've been here, you're working here right now. What do you think is the best solution for this?
What do you choose to focus on in your leadership that has the biggest impact in your organization?
Well, that's why I'm involved in AGC. I think trying to look at the big picture of what's going on in the construction industry and what trends do we need to be monitoring, and how do they affect our company? Every company is a little bit different. We all have slightly different business models, cultures, whatever you want to call them. We all go about it a little bit differently. And my involvement in AGC has allowed me to see how so many different companies across the country and somewhat internationally are attacking similar problems. As a project engineer, I've got to be in front of the superintendent by 3 months, who the superintendent is ahead of his crews by 6 months or 6 weeks or whatever our short interval planning process is. And the project manager is ahead of the project engineer by another 3 to 6 months. Then those of us in the office, we've got to be ahead a year or two or more on the latest tools that we need, whether we're talking soft tools or physical tools, or what are the next governmental regulations that we're going to have to address, or what are the best project deliveries for the types of projects that we're pursuing, whether this should be a design build project or a construction management at risk type of project. A lot of those things, a lot of soft skills that you learn. How do you build teams and get folks engaged in the process on all levels, not just as a project manager telling you do it this way.
So what do you guys do to attract and retain that next generation of talent?
I think one of our biggest situations on that front has really been to focus on how do you attract a diverse group of people to your company and embrace the diversity of thought. And there's all kinds of business cases for how a diverse company makes better decisions, because they get input from people with completely different backgrounds and ways of looking at things. How do you attract people? Well, you have to make them feel comfortable. I was just in a seminar last week, talking about why do people come to your company, why do they leave, and typically it's not money. Once in a while it is, but more often than not, they're looking to go to a place where they think they can grow, where they can feel valued, and where their values align with the rest of the company. So at Tarlton, we spend a lot of time working on work-life balance issues. I used to be a badge of honor. You'd come early, late at the office, and come in on Saturdays. Well, that was really before we had the internet and all kinds of different connectivity, and you didn't have two family incomes, and all of that. And now, everything's changed from the time that I grew up to now, and we want people to go home and catch the softball game or the school play or the parent teacher conference.
I heard something very interesting there. You talk about diversity of thought. Why is that important in construction?
Because construction can be very difficult, and one of the beauties of construction is that we can all look at the same set of plans and build that project differently, and still come out with pretty much same finished product. But when it's really, really difficult, there are times when you come up with some problems that are hard to solve. The more ideas you have that you can work through and value, the better solutions you'll be able to derive.
When you said work-life balance, I have some clients that are general engineering contractors, and it seems like between March and October there is no work-life balance, because you're just going to grind. You're going to grind. Now, the reason I ask you that is, do you think there's a difference between different types of construction companies in terms of reaching that type of work-life balance?
Yeah, well, yeah. I think everybody's, like I said, every company's got slightly different cultures and the way they attract and attack construction work-life balance. I think some companies know that there's a grind during the prime building season, and so it's going to be long days from sun up to sundown, and maybe working nights from spring to mid fall, and then there's not going to be that much work, and so everybody kind of knows that and adapts. Our construction schedules never seem to slow down here in St. Louis. We do have bad winter weather, but we work through it. Maybe we get shut down a little bit, so it just keeps on going. So there's different regional and climatological ways that you handle it. Some companies travel all the time. And so, as a young project engineer or project manager, you're on the road a whole lot. And, and so companies sometimes, they take care of that through extra compensation, or maybe they take care of it through sabbaticals or something like that, just to give people time to decompress. I don't think there's any one solution, but I do think you've got a good point, is that there can be a difference, and you got to recognize it. When I was early in my career, I was working in a refinery, and we were working around the clock during a turnaround I was probably a little out of that work-life balance for 3 months while that was going on, but I learned a lot.
I know that we're still suffering under the consequences of the Great Recession, in that we lost, a couple million people from the industry during that time. As you look at the workforce as it's coming into those leadership roles, what are you noticing about that younger generation and some of the challenges that they're experiencing?
I think the biggest challenge has been just the compression of the learning curve. Most of us have to learn a little bit along the way, and by virtue of demographics, that we're losing so many people to retirement. So the baby boomers are retiring. We're having to bring people up a lot faster and find ways to give them more experience in a shorter amount of time, so they can be the effective leaders and draw on those experiences as they're faced with different challenges in their roles.
What qualities do you think are essential for those future construction leaders?
I think really understanding your team. You got to have great communication skills. We're really working hard at that. It's a lot easier to send an email or a text message, and unfortunately, that's not the most complete way to communicate. But I also think that you have to be a team builder. You have to be engaging folks in what's important to the overall success of the project and giving their input. I think people today are more educated. I won't say they're smarter. They're educated because we have so many sources of information, whether they're coming from our phones or our computers or, you name it. People are able to get more information, and they want information. They want to know how something fits in the overall scheme of things. And as a construction leader, you need to be able to share that with people, how they're a valued member of the team, because we're always building teams in our business.
If someone wants to get into construction, what advice would you give them?
That there's not one way to get into construction. We have an industry that caters to just about every type of individual you could imagine. If you want to be an accountant, you can find a very rewarding career in construction. If you want to be an attorney, if you want to be an operating engineer, if you want to be a marketeer, if you want to, if you have a creative bent and you want to, we've got folks with all different kinds of backgrounds, whether they're in the office or in the field. Lots of opportunities, and you don't have to go to college right away to be successful. There are all kinds of folks that are successful in construction who went to school through an apprenticeship program as opposed to going to a 4-year college, have been very successful in their construction careers. So there's not one path, and you shouldn't feel shut out if you feel like, oh, well, I don't fit in for this way or that way. I think there's a spot for everybody.
I agree with you. I think that's one of the beautiful things. If you want to sell, you can go in construction. If you want to integrate technology, construction can be the place for you. Obviously, if you want to work with your hands, construction's the place to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think digitally, or you think spatially, or you think, tactilely, there are ways for you to succeed. Absolutely.
In your role as the president of the AGC, as you look at the construction industry in the United States, what's your general feeling of how things are going and where they may go in the next year or two?
I think things are going interestingly well right now. We got slammed during the Great Recession. A lot of industries recovered quicker than construction, as you mentioned. We lost a lot of great people. Then we've been excited about the recovery, and it's been a long recovery, but we still are trying to hold on to some of those lessons we learned in the recession to make sure that we don't get caught again. But I also feel a lot of optimism because we've got all these issues, but we're always finding solutions. The workforce solution is a big one. We've lost a lot of people. We're competing against other industries for folks. We don't have a regular immigration policy, which we need. But all those things said, boy, some of the people that I'm meeting now are just blowing me away at their skills in the construction world, and they're finding different ways to meet this challenge of workforce, whether it's through automation or it's through technology or it's through, better teamwork on a project. We're coming up with solutions to solve this problem, and it's pretty darn exciting. We're finding ways to be safer all the time and improving that. And I think with that, we'll be more productive. The most productive sites are typically the safest sites because they plan the work for safety first, and then the productivity just naturally follows.
What are one of two of the key lessons that you learned from going through the recession that you are continuing to use through this current boom and into the next economic cycle?
I think the biggest thing is flexibility. Being nimble and having multiple skills are important. We were just talking about this morning, how a lot of folks the typical project engineer might come into the construction industry wanting to be on the job site building things. They're not so interested in the estimating side of the business because for one reason or another, I'm not sure why. We need our engineers to understand at least the estimating process, so that in the downturn, if you're not building something, you can at least help us get out and find more work and be successful on that.
So as we wrap up here, Dirk, St. Louis, famous for barbecue. What is your favorite barbecue spot in St. Louis? You got to tell my audience.
The backyard of my parents and my dad on his charbroil that was a wedding gift, and he and my parents had been married for almost 60 years now, and my mom's homemade barbecue sauce and my dad manning the grill is the place to be.
Well, Dirk, I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today, and I know that what you had to share was extremely valuable to my listeners.
Well, great. Well, thanks, Eric. I've appreciated the opportunity to chat with you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and always remember that the show is brought to you by Kick-Ass Meetings. I've been working with construction leaders since 2004, teaching them how to run extremely effective problem-solving meetings that gets their people collaborating, taps into their creativity, and to get yourself a free copy of the Kick-Ass Meeting Report, go to www.ericanderton.com/kickassmeetings. Grab yourself that free report, read it, use it in your business. You'll find it extremely useful. And thanks again for listening.